All right, well, welcome everybody. And we're going to do a few slides and take those on and off. I would encourage you to use that button in the upper right, and you can switch between views and get a view of who's talking versus the slideshow. And we'll try to go a little bit light on the slides. Someone's already annotating away on my slide presentation here. So we'll walk through the agenda real quick here, what we're looking at. I think we've had you all take a look at the Zoom protocol sheet. Just a reminder, don't touch any buttons you don't know what they are. Make sure you're muted. I do have the ability to go through and mute folks, and I'm going to try to avoid that. We are going to tend to use that chat functionality, so make sure you've got that screen pulled up, and we'll use that mainly instead of having the me mute and unmute folks. So I can do that, and we may have a few people on the phone need to use that audio functionality. The agenda, we're going to have Rob DeMartini, who's on, our CEO, give a general USA Cycling update. I'm going to give an update on the officials programs as well as event operations, and then we're going to give a chance for you all to ask questions and answers. I would ask, there's now 160 folks on here. Like a lot of you, I'm working from home, and normally we have a couple people handling things this large. If you don't mind, just give me a minute with that chat functionality to read, and Rob or one of those staff will handle the questions that come across. It's just a little awkward with one person, even though I have two monitors going. Do want to do a few intros. You all meet Rob DeMartini, our CEO, here shortly, and Rob's going to do a few minutes. Also, Justin Evans is on. Justin is back from furlough as of this week, and we'll be talking about the part he's going to play. I've also got several members of the National Technical Commission on now. We've been in dialogue over the last week or so. There's also several USA Cycling staff, some of whom are officials and some of whom aren't, on the call. So as you go through that participant window, you can take a look, probably see some names you know. You do have the ability to chat directly with someone using that chat window. I'll advise you from hard-won experience not to confuse a private chat with an everyone chat. It can get quite embarrassing. So feel free to use that functionality as we go along. With that said, I'm going to turn things over to Rob. And Rob, you should be able to just unmute yourself and take it from here.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay. You're Sharon. So first of all, thank you for coming together this afternoon. It's great to have, I think Chuck said, 160 plus people online. It is a time when most everybody's home, but it's still nice for you to make the time available to listen to us. I'm going to spend, I really prepared just 2 slides, and they're from 2 other presentations that we've done, both an all-staff town hall that we did about 7 weeks ago now, 6 weeks ago. And then I'm going to use one of the slides I used with my board of directors last Friday to share with you kind of a state of USA Cycling and really how we're making decisions. So Chuck, if you'd bring that first slide up. What I took the board through last week was our kind of intentions throughout this. And I thought instead of inventing something new, it was very appropriate to share with officials. You guys are an important part of our community, one that we'd like to see grow and be healthier going forward. But we moved very quickly. You probably read the press release. I don't have the date in front of me, but I think by about the 17th or 18th of March, about 4 or 5 days after the country was starting to lock down, we furloughed 17 employees and executed 8 layoffs. One was technically a retirement, 1 retirement, and 7 layoffs. Not easy work, but something that you could see we were going to have to take action, and I've learned the hard way that waiting to do it is never an advantage. So we moved very quickly. We also moved quickly securing a paycheck protection program, which allowed us to bring those 17 furloughed people back for at least 8 weeks. And so we have furloughed 17, they were out for about just under 2 weeks, I believe, and then we have them back. We are making all of our decisions using 6 strategic principles, which I'll share with you in a minute. That's the next slide. They're helping us try to make sure that we aren't reacting just to short-term things, but we've got the long-term goals in mind. We are committed to developing a much larger membership base driven by enthusiast cyclists. Think of that language, that's an internal word we're using, but those tend to be non-racers. They're event riders, they cross over, some do racing and riding, some do group events, and some don't do any events. And as I've shared with you, I think in past meetings, the financial implications of racers supporting racers is clearly not going to work long term. It wasn't going to work, and I certainly don't think anything going on from this current pandemic is going to reverse those trends. Racing will remain a very critical part of what we do, and obviously a critical part of what you do, but we have got to create a community and a revenue source that is broader than racers. And so that's what that point means about enthusiasts. We also understand this is not a new idea. Derek and people before him tried this. We understand that the value proposition we have for enthusiasts today is unproven. We do think it's strengthening, and it would have been very interesting to see how much had we gone into a normal spring riding season, but that obviously didn't happen. So it does give us a pretty unique window to try to market the value proposition in a time when there is no racing, which obviously takes away the primary reason that historically our members have joined us. So we're seeing it as an opportunity. It's a challenge for sure, but we're going to learn how to make that proposition relevant to the non-racing participant. We're equally as committed to serve and maintain our current membership base, those people who do race. And we want to make sure that in our expansion, we don't leave them behind or alienate them in any way. It's one of the reasons why going into this new proposition, you saw us execute no price increases to the current racing member. And my hope is we can stay at that level for some time to come. We're also trying to extend our voice in the sport well beyond our sanctioning authority. I think historically we put ourselves in a corner of the community, and we spoke to that community, sometimes too little, sometimes too much, but didn't see the role we could take broader than that. And I think what you're seeing, hopefully you're seeing that we are doing through these strange times, is trying to speak for all of cycling in a collaborative way, not an authoritative way. We're doing a lot of work with People for Bikes. We're doing work with NICA. We're doing work with charity rides all across the cycling universe. We're trying to lead with support and investment, not with authority and a rule book, if you will. And we're also coming together as one team, and we're committed to get our way through this. The choices we made last month to downsize and furlough were based on an assumption that racing would not return before the end of June. That's proving to be at least accurate so far. I'll tell you, financially, we're prepared to have racing not come back much longer than that through the rest of the year. I'm not predicting that's what is going to happen. I'm telling you what we're planning for financially. And so I think pretty soon we're going to be up on top of our June date. And I think whether events are able to happen or whether people attend them are both open questions. We are financially preparing for no racing this season. And those plans have not been deployed. They will more than likely include lengthening the furloughs and potentially increasing the layoffs, but I don't want to articulate that yet because that plan's not finished. Before I move to the second slide, any questions or comments about this? And Chuck, if you want to do it on chat, I can do it that way, or I'm happy to take questions if you're.
Yeah, it's probably easiest for you all to use your chat functionality and we realize you need to type it in. So we may come back. We will have a Q&A at the end of this. Feel free to send those chats to everyone, not someone specifically. we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this. I know it is Friday afternoon, but Rob's
Okay.
gonna stay on. So Rob, I think we can move on. And if we get a chat pop up, you should be able to see it and answer it. So I can go to the next slide if you'd like.
Okay.
We've got one from Anna.
Anna, it's a good question. How are USAC employees feeling right now with all the changes is what she asked. And every time I give a big presentation, my wife always says, how'd it go? And I think I'm the last person you should be asking. I think, you know what, let me move to the next slide, and then I think it will help answer that question. But it is a good one. When we started this about the 13th or 14th of March, what I've always found helpful is if I can use the leadership team to come together on principles, it helps us make decisions and remember why we made the decisions over time. And so we came up with these 6 guiding principles. Number 1 was to demonstrate respect for our athletes, our staff, our partners, and the sport of cycling. And to Anna's question, how do people feel? If you watch Twitter, as soon as we announced our layoffs and furloughs, we took a fair amount of, I'll call it help in decision making, because people said, how could you cut people loose in the middle of a pandemic? We didn't. The furloughed employees, we maintained full benefits for them during their furlough. Obviously, we've brought them back, so they're back covered by benefits. If we have to furlough again, it's my intention to provide them continuing coverage all the way through a furlough period. The folks that we did lay off, we gave a very extended benefit coverage for that exact reason. I use it as just one simple example of we are trying to be respectful in what is an extremely difficult time for everybody from every angle. We recognize that. All senior staff took 20 or 10% pay cuts, starting with me all the way down to people that make anybody that makes over $40,000 a year took a pay cut immediately. Those are in place for a period of time. If we need to extend them, we will. But we tried to do it in a way where everybody gave something and everybody contributes to the outcome. I hope the staff is feeling good. As we brought the furloughed folks back, one of the ways we made the decision around furlough was what work was available versus not available. And a good example of all of our event people, all of our staff that permit and put on events, they obviously don't have their regular work available to them right now. So as they came back, we put them on 6 different cross-functional projects that would help our financial capability going forward, would help the way we function. So I'm also hoping that them being part of the solution will help contribute to how they feel about the organization, their jobs, us, me, whatever you want to say. So I hope I answered that.
Why don't you take Christopher's question, and I can answer a couple others. And guys, keep these coming. We'll probably move on. We'll answer Christopher's real quick, and we'll save the other for the Q&A, unless they're absolutely relevant. So.
Okay, will you click back one slide? I want to make sure I word it right as I answer Chris's question.
Yep.
Christopher's question. I'm focusing on the word support there because you've highlighted that in quotes. The enthusiast, one of the ways that we are trying to make our membership value proposition work for the enthusiast is the concept of ride benefits. And obviously the historical model was race benefits. And that benefit I would put in quotes, which means we'll let you into the race, right? That's the financial model that we've had. For non-sanctioned events, instead of mandating license or membership to enter, we've worked with so far about 50 good-sized, well-known rides across the country, things like the Emmett Smith Grand Fondo, and said, look, I don't want to ask you to require a membership to enter the event, but what I want you to do is provide benefits around early registration a very modest pricing discount on entry in the event, an advantage start position, and an advantage in-ride and post-ride experience, a members-only beer tent, if you will. If we can create that kind of benefits inside the event, it'll let us sell memberships to non-racers in a way where they'll feel like their $40 a year membership is getting them something specific. They'll support what you do, they'll support our development of Olympic athletes, but they'll also get something that's, think of it as a medallion boarding line at an airline, that everybody gets on the plane, but some people get on a little bit better experience. So that's the kind of support we're talking about for enthusiasts. I would tell you, for the non-event riding member, it's less clear to me exactly what those personal benefits are. We've still got to work on that. Okay, hopefully that answered that, Chris. So number one was I laid out respect for our athletes, our staff, our partners in the sport. Number two was to maintain our long-term viability. People think we're a financially much stronger and bigger organization than we are, and this loss of racing, permitting, and membership revenue has hit us hard and fast, and we need to ensure we take the aggressive steps it'll take so we're here next year and the year beyond, that we send our athletes to Tokyo and that we're prepared to send them to Paris. And I've tried to not be dramatic with the organization, but I have had to let them know that we are facing that head on right now if we don't make some significant changes. The third principle was to support the Tokyo team and to defer everything else in development in the short run. And the simple reason was, now remember, we made this choice before Tokyo was delayed, but I wouldn't change it now. That if the athletes that lined up in Tokyo, to me, one of the worst things in their mind, they were not prepared because of something we had or hadn't done or had not prepared them for. As it relates to the Paris athletes, we have time to recover. So this is simply a prioritizing now versus later. That's what that third bullet point means. Number four was to solve the membership challenge, drive auto renewal, and enable more giving. We need to reach out to our network, either members or donors, and let them know we have never needed them more than we do right now. And then the last two, I hope make sense to you. It's to return grassroots riding and racing as fast as possible. I don't know what that means yet. It doesn't mean before June, that's for sure. But sometime, hopefully this late summer or fall, we can get back to riding and racing, and Chuck will speak more about what we're doing to try to help with that. And then the last one was to reinitiate elite development as fast as practical. So those were the 6 guidelines we put in place, and I'll stop at that point and see if there's any other questions that I should take. Or JD, you asked a very good question. Unfortunately, we've already paid our insurance premium for the year, and whether we get any of it back is very questionable. Long term, there will be a benefit from reduced claims this year, I would think, but that's not something that we're going to get much benefit from anytime soon.
Yeah, JD, this is Chuck. That was obviously the first, one of the first things we explored. And if you all have not, we did a webinar on insurance for our event organizers earlier this year. I'd encourage you all, because of how involved you are, to go in and take a look. But one of the issues we have is we, much like your house, you pay that premium. We pay it in December for the coming year, and we gather that money back through license fees and racer surcharges. We do more than cover races. Every licensee, including you as officials, has an insurance policy, as I think you know. That is a little bigger bill than probably your house insurance. It's in the millions of dollars, and that money is out the door now. And we are not seeing necessarily the income as you would imagine to cover that. So that's the situation. But JD, Todd Soul, our CFO, is absolutely looking at that exact question you asked, and how that will impact really more than this year, next year's rates. So we'll keep you guys updated through the year. And Stuart just sent out a link on chat to that insurance webinar for you all to take a look at. So again, I think we'll move on. Rob will stay on, I believe, and be available for Q&As at the end. So I'm going to run through what I call an operations update. And again, I apologize. I'm trying to multitask here a little bit. Want to cover a few items in relation to officials. I got a lot of questions after we posted this webinar or forum about what's going to happen with bike racing. So outside of where we are with the officials program, I am going to spend quite a bit of time at the end covering that. And I've got just a few slides I think will help illustrate. You know, one question that's come up quite a bit is our officials numbers, and we've shared these over the years. I thought it'd be pretty interesting to compare that to where we are with our actual race day. So I'll show you this chart. This is the last 10 years. And thanks to Justin for putting this together this week. I don't think it's any surprise. I mean, a lot of you have seen the presentations that Derek and others have done. Basically, we show a big bell curve. We show the early mid-90s, a pretty tremendous growth in the sport, and then a tapering off really in what we call, you know, the post-Lance years. The number of officials has actually mirrored that change, and we can definitely show some of the big losses related to policy and other things, particularly in that 2011 to 2012. That's when we went to a safe sport and a background check system, and a lot of folks didn't find it financially feasible. Since then, we've actually seen the rate slow. What I'm showing you on the top line, which is the permitted events, that's not race days, is races. It's not events overall. So showing you this, I want to pull up some points. Despite the decrease in actual race permits, our event days themselves have stayed relatively flat. And what we've seen is a transition more from our traditional race to gravel, grand fondos, etc. Some of that's a business deal. That's more of what we brought in. And some of that has been, I think we've all seen a move to that particular type of event. Early 2020, actually, we have had over the last couple of years a move, since I've been more involved in the event side, a move toward a strategy to bring more and different events in. And we've also changed some of our business practices. I will say we actually have finally seen that come to fruition early this year. For the first time since I've been at USA Cycling, which is almost 5 years ago now, we started to see really positive signs. We're actually up 25% in competitive events. And Rob just brought up on mountain bike. A lot of that is mountain bike. Even though competitive road was flat for events, and I was actually welcoming flat because we've been down every year, we were up in racer days. So the number of people actually getting on bikes and racing was up. And competitive mountain bike, you can see there, that's actually racer days. We were up 81%. We really targeted going after mountain bike events and bringing them on board, and we were being very successful in that. So as of March 1, I was pretty bullish on the year, and we looked pretty good. And then society changed. Essentially, since mid-March 2020, we've had no events. And I didn't even have the stomach to look at the numbers, to be quite honest, this week. So I'll talk in a little bit about what we possibly see changing there, and how we're going to work to bring the sport back. As Rob mentioned, we have had staffing changes. I want to spend a minute talking about who you should contact and sort of who's going to be handling the officials program. This spreadsheet I'm showing you here, don't worry about taking a picture of it because it's up on our website right now. Justin Evans is back as of last week, and Justin is going to be really handling the bulk of the officials communication for the near term. One thing we have done is gone to a generic officials@usacycling.org email. So what we'd ask you guys to do is, if you do need to communicate on officials matters, if you can start to transition to that. We've got that handled by several different staff that we have access to it, and it allows us to route that the correct place internally. You'll be able to find this spreadsheet on the official section of USA Cycling webpage at usacycling.org/officials, and there's a resource tab. And this is really, we felt it was important at this point to list all of our key staff, their positions. You've got our mobile numbers on there and our emails. We also included some of the useful links that people tend to ask us about on the bottom. If you didn't know, on our website now, on the very top sort of right, there's a resources button or text. And if you click that, we've got a pretty neat section we put together. It's keyword searchable. You can filter it by things that are relevant to race directors or officials or others. And I encourage you to bookmark that. So right now, Justin is going to be handling, again, most of the officials' communications. And I'll be secondary to him and answer your questions if needed. And if you can make sure to work to transition to that, make sure and transition to that officials@usacycling.org website. I do want to mention here the National Technical Commission. That page on our website's been updated. It's that same usacycling.org/officials. And just want to call them out in a good way. Some of them will be on here, and I encourage you to reach out to them, because we're going to be working quite a lot with that group over the coming year. Group's going to be Bonnie Walker, Dot Abbott, Sarah Rodney, Tom Nee, Bruce Brazenly, Michael Donovan, Steve Epple, Noreen Landis Tyson, and Andy McCord. And these are all high-level officials. More importantly, they really cover a pretty broad geographical area, as well as the disciplines that we're racing in. We've got mountain bike, BMX, road, track, cross, all that international and national commissaries on that group. So I'll talk a little bit here in a second about where we're going to move with that group. I'm just catching up with the catching up with chat, and I don't see anything that can't wait till the end, so we're going to continue to move on. I want to talk about a few initiatives. I approached the National Technical Commission with this. Rob and I were chatting, and really we're going to do a bit of a shift here on moving toward getting our officials more involved. We've done a lot with staff. We've done a lot with a small group of officials, but really want you all to get involved more in this community. So with that said, we're looking at putting together 3 groups. We're calling them task force to look at 3 items which have perpetually been a bit of an issue for us. The first one is culture and community. How do we talk to our officials community? What's it mean to be a race official? And it should probably be more than it is. So Dot Abbott's agreed to put a group together to talk about that. The second, and I'll talk about assignments a little more in depth here in a bit, is reimagining that process. We've struggled with that. We've got tools that are outdated, which we know, and it's time to just fix it. Bonnie has been helping us quite a bit with the national process and has a good IT background, and she is going to be heading up a group to look at that. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested in that, and that's not only technology, that's how we do things and how we run things. And then another is training, development, and recruitment. We've had some decent baby steps over the last year, and we want to reverse that trend and slideshow we saw earlier, and also support our current officials. And again, I'll talk a little more in depth about what we've got coming up on that. And Sarah Rodney is going to handle that. Instead of pinging these folks individual, if you want to send your interest to that official's website, and we will make sure it gets forwarded to those folks. If you do know them, feel free to reach out. If you don't and have interest, Justin will make sure that that gets sent to them, and we're going to let them consider the different groups. Hopefully we have a ton of people and put together a good working group for each of those. Speaking of training, we do have some virtual training coming up here in the next few months. And again, thanks to the folks who are stepping up to do these. Sarah Rodney's going to run a Cat B road upgrade. We've been running these classes regionally, and that is costly and tough to put together on any good day, much less when we're under current conditions. So Sarah's agreed to put together a class to instruct that, and this will be something outside of the current time period we're in, which we're probably going to move towards. Noreen Landis Tyson has agreed to host a virtual track secretary class, so we'll be putting that together. And I've said I will be happy to teach a road motor C class. That's a really tough one for us to do. We travel around the country and teach 4 and 5 people at a time. We have done one virtual version of that worked well, and we're going to commit to doing that more. We just don't want to bottleneck. The NTC also brought up just the idea, some of you get Referee Magazine from NASO. A really good point of that is they have, really neat articles about what to do in certain situations and how to handle mechanics of officiating. So we will take a look at putting some of those together over the coming months. A great example is we had a pit quiz that I think Doc put together a few years ago, what to do and what not to do in a wheel pit and a criterium. And things like that, we'll take a look at doing it. I'm getting some questions over classes. One's a cross mountain bike secretary. It's definitely something we can do. Both Sarah and Noreen are in the process of developing a class. I don't have a time for you today, but I think it's safe to say this summer we'll be running those. For the Motor C class, I've actually got a curriculum built for that. We can knock that out probably in a month or so and set one of those up. Also, we will be doing the new rules webinar here shortly. We actually put a couple of rule changes in the board meeting a Friday ago, and I want to get those integrated. Lastly, we have moved to an online Cat C training class. We've been doing that for a few years now. It's very basic, and we have a learning management system that we're going to be putting together that we just need to get the materials onto it, which has been a little tough with our current staffing. So that'll be rolled out. Sarah just responded to you all. She's looking at May to do her B road upgrade. So we'll get that posted out to all the folks who are eligible for it and move forward. Want to talk a little about assignments. I had some questions on that. And really at the national and local level. Frankly, with the national assignments, we had our hands full, as you can imagine, over the last month with canceling, talking to folks, and we didn't do a great job of communicating with the officials on that who were assigned. That's been somewhat remedied. If you go to the officials website again and click on that resources tab, we have all the national road assignments put up with current status of the event, whether it's canceled, as normal, postponed. And in speaking with Justin, Dot, and Bonnie, we are going to start doing a better job as we learn about these. Just today, I found out another 2 fall events have been canceled, unfortunately, and we'll be doing a better job of making sure the officials' crews know of that. In addition, for even our national championships, we are looking at definitely postponing, possibly canceling, or moving locations. And we may have to, in some cases, even resubmit that. Some of you can't make a new date. Some of you can't make a different location. So we're going to be working through that over the next couple of weeks. On the local level, we don't have quite as much from our office involvement. What I've asked our event permit staff to start doing is, if there is a official listed on the permit, to basically get in touch with them along with the local association and the event. If you are assigned to an event, please stay in touch with the event organizer. I will say I've actually read about cancellations of big events on Facebook as well before I got the email. If you can stay in touch, it's a ton of information for us to digest. We literally contacted every single event organizer from mid-March through May through our event staff, and it was hundreds of events. So it's quite a bit of work there, and we'll make sure you get that. Justin, if you don't mind dropping a link into the chat, and we'll get you guys a link to that resource page where those assignments are. Jeff was just asking, and again, I can pull that up in just a minute. I'm going to spend just a second looking back through the chat here, having to do this alone at home. So I'm going to save a couple of these for later. See, cross secretary class Dot says she can look into that. Track judge referee class, Jeffrey, I'll talk to Noreen about that and see where we are on that. I assume that's what JR means there. And I'm gonna jump out of my screen share now and just give you guys an update and sort of best practices and where we see bike racing going. So let me jump out of the slideshow, and I think you guys will see me. I didn't bother to do a fancy background. You get my office in the back. So give me just one sec to get set here. I'll just be as transparent with you all as a group as I can on what we're seeing out in the world. We've not been sitting around. We've been talking to quite a few medical experts. We have a doctor who's very involved in virology and epidemiology consulting with us. We also have the chief medical officer from the USOPC, the Olympic Committee, working with us, and we've been talking to a ton of event organizers. Every week we sit on the professional race directors call and chat with them. So what I'm going to give you is what we're seeing from the medical perspective, as well as what we're seeing out on the race with the races themselves. There's a lot of challenges, as we all know. I think those are, I sort of put them into three buckets. There's a safety bucket that we don't want participants, volunteers, officials, anyone going to an event with a high risk of getting sick with something bad. And I think that has to be number one. Aside from that, you are very experienced with bike races. There's a real financial risk to organizers as well. I cannot imagine that we are going to see huge crowds going to races, especially at the national level. And that may be because they're afraid of getting sick. It may be because they can't travel. It may be maybe they don't have a job anymore and they're financially distressed and can't go. And that is going to be a pretty high level impact to a lot of events. As we know, a lot of them run off their entry fees. And I think the third item, which is a little hard to put our hands around, is what I'm calling the optics of this. I'll give you an example. Our mountain bike national championships is in Winter Park, Colorado, small mountain town. That area's been hit pretty hard. And we're talking about bringing 2,000 people from around the country to that location in July. And the appetite for a lot of communities is not necessarily there for that. So it creates big challenges. For the first time in my career, I've got convention and visitors bureaus telling me it's okay if you don't come to my town. Where normally they're just begging for folks to come in. And I think we have to have a real decision on how wise it is to go into those locations. Now, does that mean no events will happen? No. So the way we're working on this right now is sort of taking two stabs at it with a task force, and we're going to see the first iterations of what we've got coming next week. One, for the events themselves, we're creating a risk analysis, and we're basically, the question was about the USOPC and other organizations. We're modifying what the WHO and some of those organizations have done. And this is going to be a tool for event organizers to look at what the risk is from a safety perspective, from the financial, and from the optics, and be better informed about what the decision they're going to make on their event is. And above all, I can tell you right now, it's going to be hard to get event permits in a lot of areas for folks. That cities and towns don't want groups joining together. That's going to be the number one question. And then we're going to give them that tool to do their assessment of their own event sort of fairly. Secondly, we are building out a set of best practices for these events. And again, we've got a group of pretty smart folks, and they're working with some of our event organizers who are taking those guidelines from CDC, WHO, and USOPC and modifying those or turning them into cycling speak. We've already seen some pretty good stuff that's come out of a running that some of the organizations have sent out. We obviously have a different sport. And this is not just going to be the mitigation. It's going to be how can you adapt your event. Mass start road racing is much more problematic than time trials when we're talking about social distancing. A mountain bike gravity event, if you can spread people a couple minutes apart and they're taking the chairlift up one at a time, is going to be a lot easier to run than a mass start cross-country race where you got a lot of folks together. On the track, time trials are going to be easier to run than, points race. And within all of this, outside the actual competition, there's a ton of small things that are particular to our sport. I mean, I don't necessarily want to go to a time trial now and be doing bike check and be handed, 400 bikes at a national championship from God knows where. And that could be something we could back off on. Our timeline for that is 2 weeks from now. I think late next week, we're going to have some information available. And we're gonna ask events and work with them to do the right thing. Where it is possible to do a safe event or a safer event, we are going to encourage that and work to assist those folks on doing it. Where events have to push till next year, then we are going to help them do that. We push some fees and other things to next year for some events. We're already working on our 21 calendar with the Pro Road Tour and our national championships. And we're going to do what we can to have viable bike racing this year. I think sort of the last thing talking about that, and I'll answer some more questions, is communication with so many things is important. And that's why I encourage you, if you're assigned to an event, work with that event. What we're telling events now, what we started last week with our nationals, is we don't know what's going to happen in the fall. But what we're going to do is tell you what our current status is. Here's what we're looking to do. Here's the measures that we're looking to take. And here's the filters we're going to use. And here's the point where we put our next communication out. And those have been, the big races are tending to do that. And those are the ones that are interacting well with their participants and I think have a good future. But mass start bike racing is going to be tough for the fall. And not only because of the safety, because of all those other things I mentioned. You all will need to make your own personal decisions if there's a race on whether to go or not based on your personal circumstances. So that's where we sit, and we'll have more coming out again in the next 1 to 2 weeks. I'm going to run back a little bit and take a look at some of the questions. Missy asked a question about grassroots racing, fees for permitting officials, and how do we help promoters deal with this issue and encourage enthusiasts to join these lower level races. Missy, one thing we're doing right off, well, I'm not going to tell you you're all getting a pay cut. Don't think that'd go over well. But Missy, one thing we're doing there is that new novice membership we have, and I'd encourage you to go online. I'll make sure that we get our guidebook to that posted on the officials page. Justin, if you make a note, is it's a $40 enthusiast membership, but it allows unlimited racing for that new novice, which was the Cat 5 or Cat 3 category. So we basically just slashed the price for folks. So if we can get these enthusiasts in, from a Grand Fondo or gravel event, show them some value, the transition to a mountain bike or cyclocross or road event is very easy for them. They've already got what they need, and they can just go to that. So that's one thing we're looking at. We've also got some toolkits for new riders, which are coming out. Liz Kohler just developed one for juniors, which will be rolling shortly. That website's almost done. We've got one we're going to be working on for gravel participants. And, you know, we'd like to give people a nudge over to bike racing as well. Let's see, Christopher asked, for those of us that are race directors, how will we convince our permitting authorities it's safe to race in their town? Christopher, that's one of the intents of this best practice tool, is we can at least equip you with a tool to take to them to show steps you are taking per the CDC and WHO and USOPC to make your event safer. I started out my career as a permit writer for a city, and have a little bit of insight into that. A lot of that is going to be relational, and being able to take these toolkits to them. So, and we're happy to talk to you one-on-one. How you can convince, you can try to convince. It's going to be their call in the end. What plans are in place for road promoters to stay sanctioned when the benefits non-USAC are getting better? I'll argue that we've got pretty good benefits. We've got the best insurance in the business, and I will stand behind that. And I encourage you to watch that webinar. You know, one thing I talk about that you guys are a part of as far as races go.
Oh, it's Randy Schaefer.
Oh, sorry. Do a mute on there. All right. You know, the officials are part of it, and pardon my use of the term, but, you know, streets and sewers. I come out of city government. We provide the police and firefighters and ordinances for our sport. We provide the rules. We provide you all as officials. We provide the training. We provide safe sport. We provide background checks. And you can't tell me someone going to a USA Cycling road race with that in place is not going to have a better experience in general than someone who's not. And there's a lot of people who go out and grab that stuff from us. I just was working with a member who's doing an unsanctioned event, and that unsanctioned event is using our rule book, our bike regulations, and requires our license, but they're not paying into it, and that stuff does cost money to do. Stuart and his team also have some other items we're working on with that. Let me keep going down this. Rob commented, Stephen, that we're working with USOPC. Let's see. Leslie asks, is gravity only mountain bike nationals a possibility? Just talked to Tara McCarthy, who's I think might be on. We're looking at different options for all of our nationals, as I mentioned. Is it a possibility? Yes. Everything's a possibility right now. What we're really looking at is it's always tough when we have some nationals and not others, as you can imagine. Wherever we draw that line, do we have elite racing and not junior racing? Do we have U23 and not juniors? Do we have masters and not whatever? So that's a tough thing. Vince says, I'm more optimistic. Am I reading too much into it? Vince, I thought I was playing Debbie Downer, quite frankly. I will tell you that I don't see us extending our current prohibition, blanket prohibition of events past where it sits. We are going to go back to local control. I'm not highly optimistic that those permit writers are going to be writing a lot of event permits for the summer. And that events that do happen are going to probably need to look different, and they're going to be challenged, but we're going to work with them to do the best they can and push their events forward. See, Michael, he asked about my second bucket. So the buckets were safety, finances, and optics is the challenges that events are facing. Steve Barnett, is it better to encourage event organizers to start their permits now or work until things become more clear? Stephen, they're welcome to start a new permit. By the way, our new permitting system is up and running and in place. So we'd love them to jump on and take advantage of that. I will tell you, our event services staff is prepared to work with these events to move. We've done it since mid-March, and we will work with them on fees and dates and whatever we need to make them comfortable, including moving insurance around and things like that. Tara responded to everyone in chat about nationals. Phil asked, how does this framework reflect the differences we're seeing on a state-by-state basis in reopening communities? How does USAC manage this centrally? Phil, that's a great question. I think for nationals, as an example, that is a huge question Tara and I have asked. Is it fair to have a national championship if half the country can't come? And, not necessarily. I think a lot of the big international events are looking at it. I think what we will see is actually a lot more local racing. The weeknight races that we all see, that's that weeknight time trial, they're going to probably have the easiest comeback. People aren't coming in from around, their financials are a lot easier to manage, and I think they're easier to handle. But, Phil, it's just like we're seeing in society in general. Some states are ready to open or think they are, some are not. We think the local governments are best equipped in a lot of ways to determine that safety aspect. And that's the way we're going to head with that. So I hope that helps with that. Are you comfortable with the decline in racers and races is fully understood? You can't solve a problem if you don't know what it is. This one is existential. Rob DeMartini, I don't know if you want to pipe in on any of this. I'll put you back on mute, but sort of maybe this is a good, how we're seeing people shift around an enthusiast first race.
It's a good question, and I agree that the deeper we understand the cause of the decline or the loss of interest, the better. But I do think to a great degree, we do understand the main drivers. You're seeing a shift off of road onto dirt surfaces, whether that's gravel or mountain bike. And why is that? I mean, I grew up an enthusiast cyclist, not a racer. And I would tell you it's two things. It's safety, and it's the fact that the premium level or the top level of cycling, road in particular, has distanced itself from the community. When you go to a marathon, you're at the same event with the people that are up in the 5-minute pen. You have the same conditions. If you're me, you get twice as much of an event. Cycling doesn't work that way. And I know there's some legitimate reasons why, but part of the motivation you're seeing in the gravel community is, whether it's called a race or not, it is certainly a race at the front. It's a party in the middle, and it's a sufferfest in the back. And, I think competitive racing doesn't have that community aspect to it as much. So I think there are things we can do, but I also think that safety and there's a number of things that are, I don't want to say they're out of our hands, but I don't think we're single-handedly able to address them in a timeline that lets it change that trajectory. So I do think we understand the drivers of it. I don't think it's going away, but I don't think it's going to have a resurgence in a traditional way. I think it will resurge in a more community. The vibe that you see at mountain bike races and at gravel events is much more like where I think this is going.
And to add to that, Rob Rowan, for you asked the question. We have done surveys on this of, it's life change. I fell off my bike and got hurt. I think our biggest concern is sort of our churn rate of how many people are coming to this and not returning after a year. And that's about 30%. One thing we took our baby step of introducing that novice category. And before the world changed a month and a half ago, we reached out to our organizers. And we think that capturing that fun aspect of these participatory rods in racing is hugely important. And, most of us have been out there on a crit, and we start the Cat 5s, and some poor guy gets dropped on the first lap, and we pull them, and they're never coming back. And how do we change that? And that's everything with our event organizers from, for you all, don't pull that rider. How do you show them how to pin their numbers on? Maybe they get a separate line. I mean, the number of people who come into the sport and just get overwhelmed in the first event or two, especially on road, is something we need to change. And we've already started to step through that. So JD asked the question about, is USA Cycling zero roles for officials and non-competitive? We actually have. Matter of fact, our Grand Fondo National Championships, we are looking at putting officials there. A lot of these gravel events, as an example, I don't know that we would assign officials to it, but our race officials see a ton of events. You know, the UCI uses the term experts serving cycling. And I think that is appropriate. I don't see us assigning officials, but making that knowledge base and officials available to those events on an individual negotiated basis is something definitely helpful. That has come up with some of, especially the gravel events, believe it or not. Michael asked about clinics and camps. Michael, you may want to shoot a note to Stuart Lamp and have them, but we are willing to permit those again based on all the parameters and safety being done. Thoughts about doing something like regionals versus nationals. The one that experienced a larger race is something to train for. They really don't feel strong in nationals versus regionals. That's something I'll kick to Stuart to look over. We do have state and regional championships in our disciplines, and we've actually talked about using those as qualifiers in the future for nationals. So I'm sorry I'm going fast. I'm trying to catch up through all these chats.
Chuck, I'll speak to Jurgen's question.
Yep.
So a question was put out there: have we considered people are going to lose, half or more in some cases of their license fee, their officials fee, all that kind of thing? I wish there was a good answer to this. If we refund licenses, we will go out of business. It is that simple. So I would encourage you to buy into the idea that, like me, this is a sport you believe in. These things were not caused by us or anybody else. And that if people start, it's just like a race director. If you have to refund everything, you're not going to be here to put on this event next year. So we are trying not to get into the business of refunding. If we have to go there, we'll end up out of business.
Great. And I will tell you, I did talk to Lindsay, who's our director of membership, and we are going to move to a rolling 365-day license for officials as soon as we get we're moving officials over to our new platform that we have membership on now, which is actually working. And at that time, we'll transition to 365. So if you buy a license in March, it's good through March. As we get new officials on in June and July, and their licenses expire December 31st, that's just not a good thing. So yeah, we'll be moving that direction as well. And if you guys can send the last few, we're going to start wrapping it up. Erica asked, she says she thinks promotion for profit has increased entry fees substantially. Erica, it is something we've seen in my tenure of doing this. I've definitely seen a move from the volunteer / club putting on a race for the good of the sport and not needing to make money to these professional or semi-professional organizers who are feeding their kids and paying the mortgage with this, maybe fully, maybe partly. That has definitely put on pressure on entry fees, and it is a huge balance between the experience and the entry fee that those folks get. But we're definitely seeing that in a lot of areas. I know you're in Colorado, and I think you see it here locally. And I will tell you, those organizers are looking at every dollar. They're looking at their officials' fees. They're looking at their insurance surcharges. And we all need to be very sharp. And I talk to these folks, as Stuart does every week, to offer them value and be competitive, which goes back to the previous questions. Phil asked about the post-COVID best practices for local organizers. Phil, we're going to open this up to everybody, sanctioned, unsanctioned. I talked to Cycling Canada today. We're going to give it to them. This is something we feel is a service to the community. We hope it's good enough to be considered a service to the community, but we're going to make it available to everybody to use, not just our folks. So that will be agnostic as far as that's concerned. So, and Tara answered some of that as well. I'm just trying to catch up. Robert said a safe sport and background amnesty for a year. Robert, the backgrounds may be us. There are some safe sport considerations with that. But Kelsey, who handles that, is on with us. I will tell you, it's a lot easier. It's only 10 or 15 minutes a year now once you've been through it the first time. So Sarah asked about considering going back to requiring clubs to put on a race. Yes, it gets talked about every meeting. And two things for that, Sarah. We don't want to have them required to put on a race. We want to have them required to materially contribute. So they may not have to put it on, but they at least need to volunteer, subsidize, have some impact. We also want to have our event toolkit built out before we do that, because I don't want to hand someone the requirement to put on a race without the tools on how to best put on that race. And I think you guys have seen plenty of people who don't know how to put on races, putting them on. So that's where we're going with that. So Tony talks about officials being on the front lines, basically on COVID best practices. Absolutely, you guys will get this. So, it's always that tough call of the local government, the health department, the officials, and the organizer all doing the right thing, but we're going to try to equip you all with that info. So I caught up. So Rob, you want to leave us with any final remarks before we close it down here?
Am I off mute? Yeah, I am. Just first of all, I started by saying thank you for coming together and giving us this time. Thank you for your contributions to the sport. It is a community. We're working hard to try to make it both bigger and better. I think the task forces that Chuck has outlined is a great way to take your cycling passion and put it to work over the next few months while you can't do the normal work. I hope you understand the financial situation we're in. I was just typing a note to everybody. I hope my earlier answer wasn't callous. I didn't intend it to be. But we're basically a fixed cost organization. We pay a big insurance bill. We pay salaries. The team has taken significant cuts, and we are eliminating every variable expense we have. And we can get through this year. And if racing returns to a much more normalized way next year, and we can expand membership, we can be a very vibrant organization. But we are staring it down right now, and with the wrong moves, we will be out of business. I can't stress that enough. If we don't make good choices and we don't protect our nest egg, if you will, which has gotten awfully small, we won't be here to let you guys do what you do so well. I'm confident we can get through it, but I do think we have to make hard choices, and we have to move with both compassion and conviction to be successful. And we're bought in to do it. So I hope you are too.
Great, thanks, Rob. And I'll follow that up. I mean, it's good to see everybody. I jumped on a call with all of our teams and our race directors a couple weeks ago, and was quite frankly shocked at how much I miss seeing folks and not being out there in the field. I know you guys are going through the same, and this has been a super tough time. I lost, as one of the other officials are on here, basically lifetime assignments. I got an assignment I never thought I'd get in my life, and I'm not going now because the event's been canceled or postponed. So, these are tough on all of us. I'll also just tell you all that it's come up. I think this has gone over pretty well. I'll commit to you later this summer or midsummer to do another one of these to give you all an update. We have a ton of groups that we talk to, and I'm an official. That's how I started in the sport, and it's taken us a few weeks to get this together, but we're talking to the teams, the races, our sport committees, our local associations. There's a ton of groups, and you guys are important too. So we'll get this set up and do more and more to at least keep you guys involved virtually over the summer until we get back to what we love to do. So with that, we're going to have this posted here in the next few days. Feel free to reach out to us at that email, and I hope everybody has a great weekend and maybe at least gets out to ride your bike. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them, and we'll get them answered individually. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.